Well, guys, as I'm sure you know, Matt Hancock has a book out called The Pandemic Diaries that he claimed is the full truth. This, I know for a fact, is pure tripe, but to be honest with you, his book is not what I want to talk about. No, today I want to talk about his article from Isabel Oakshire, who helped him write his little book. The reason for this is because she gives us some information not seen in his book that comes from research done right in the book itself. This means government communications and shit like that. Now, it's got to be said that even her, as someone who claims to not agree with Hancock, she's still not telling us the whole truth, but the things said in this are pretty damning when it comes to the past few years. Shit, it should actually demolish any trust people have in politicians and the other scumbags involved in this, so let's go through it. First, it starts with the jab policy that he implemented and was obviously finished off by Sajid Javid. She starts this segment with the crusade to vaccinate the entire population against the disease with low mortality rate among all but the very elderly is one of the most extraordinary cases of mission creep in political history. Well, talk about understatement of the century and could end up being a lot more than mission creep if adverse events are anything to go by. Criminal could be a word you would use. Now, we all know about the jab mission creep that went from jab the old and sick to jab everyone 4 times a year until the cows come home. She mentions the fact that it went to everyone, including kids, alongside the fact she also mentions that people have died as a result of these jabs and the current strep A infections are being blamed on lockdown. This is not news to any of us, but further down she talks about the logic behind this, and my god, it should see people arrested for medical crimes if you ask me. Here she states, why did the goalposts move so far off the pitch? Well, they moved to a new stadium, never mind off the pitch, you dopey bin. She said, I believe multiple driving forces combined almost accidentally to create a policy which was never subjected to rigorous cost-benefit analysis. Well, that there shows her naivety or complicity because none of this was a bloody accident. This was calculated and calling it anything else is pure bloody bullshit. I mean, she's claiming here that it's accidental groupthink that caused this, when no, the groupthink was deliberate and needed to keep it going as long as they did. They didn't have any dissenting voices there because they didn't bloody want them. Now, another bullshit point she also makes is here where she literally writes this. In Hancock's defense, he would have been crucified for failing to order enough vaccines for everybody just in case. Well, just in case of what? They knew in 2020 this was not something that was lethal to 99% of the population, so just in case don't bloody fly. The isolated cruise ships proved that beyond all doubt in 2020 and after because most people didn't die, in fact most didn't even get bloody sick. Now, after that, she keeps on sucking his plums about the jab rollout and all of this before saying he's adamant that he didn't cut corners on safety. Here she writes, he's adamant that he never cut any corners on safety, though the tone of his internal communication suggests that in his hurtling rush to win the global race for a vaccine, he personally would have been willing to take bigger risks.
You what?
Now that there should see him arrested if you ask me, because let's remember, bigger risks he's willing to take is people's healths and lives. He's not taking a risk on a rise in stock or anything like that, he's taking a risk on a person's well-being. That there should be bloody criminal, and as for not cutting corners on safety, I must say I'm confused as to how they could actually claim that. Me personally, I always thought vaccines had to go through 5 or 10-year studies before being rolled out en masse to the public, as part of not cutting corners. This is why most jabs take 30 years to make and not 12 months, I guess, but then again, what would I know? They just follow the science. But yeah, I'm having a bit of an hard time with the claims of corners not cut, but obviously it don't stop there. Apparently he was only stopped in taking more risks with people's lives by medical staff telling him to wind his bloody neck in. Apparently that Kate Bingham Trout told him to slow the fuck down before he actually killed people. Here she writes, his enthusiasm was constrained by medical and scientific advisors alongside Kate Bingham, like I've said. It states she was so alarmed by his haste that at one point she warned him that he might kill people, and that's apparently a quote. She never thought it was necessary to jab everyone and repeatedly sought to prevent Hancock from over-ordering, over-ordering at our expense. She goes on, once he had far more than was needed for the initial target group of elderly and clinically vulnerable patients, he seems to have felt compelled to use it. Setting ever more ambitious vaccination rollout targets was a useful political device. So that there is what many of us knew and got called nutters for saying back then. This was used as a political tool to control the public and not done based on medical bloody need. That, as far as I know, breaches all kind of laws, human rights and medical ethics, does it not? That there should see people arrested at the very fucking least. Now, after that, and related to it, we have a segment here on side effects monitoring, or should we say the lack of it. She starts off by writing, given the unprecedented speed at which the vaccine was developed, the government might have been expected to be extra careful about recording and analysing any reported side effects. Yeah, they might have been, but they bloody didn't. Instead, they tried their best to cover up any for as long as they bloody well could. It goes on here though, while there was much anxiety about potential adverse reactions during clinical trials, once it passed regulatory hurdles, ministers seemed to stop worrying. Yeah, they didn't worry about keeping an eye on adverse effects, they worried instead about making social media companies take down anyone claiming adverse effects occurred after the jab. Shithole accounts got nuked for stating medical fact, most likely at the insistence of government ministers. She goes on though, I was told that we were doing it, but I worry that the details will be shonky, Hancock told Witty, sounding as if it was all a bit of an afterthought. That's because it bloody was. Witty replied that the system was reasonable but needed to get better. Well, the system is useless and they left it like that deliberately if you ask me. In fact, they ignored and censored anyone talking about the yellow card scheme for a while, let's never forget. It goes on though, this exchange, which Hancock didn't consider to be of any significance, is likely to be seized on by those with concerns about vaccine safety. Well, that shit should be seized on by everyone because it shows a cavalier disregard for people's health. It shows that they were more interested in boasting about rolling out the jabs the quickest than they was about worrying about safety. We suspected this, but the general sheeple out there don't know it and likely never will. Now up next we have Scotland and the political bullshit that helped push masks and all that crap more during all this. First she talks about them worrying about breaking up the union, which to be honest I don't care about. No, what matters more is this bit here. Throughout the pandemic, far-reaching policy decisions, especially in the national travel restrictions and the timing of lockdowns, were distorted by what Sturgeon was doing or what Number 10 feared she might do. So following the science was not following the science, but instead following what that little gargoyle was doing to save face politically.
I don't fucking believe it.
You better believe it, because it's fucking happening.
Yep, here it states, Hancock describes her move to mandate mask wearing in secondary schools in late August 2020 as one of her most egregious attempts at one-upmanship to date, admitting that the UK government was left scrabbling around to formulate a response. The UK's government's own guidance on face coverings had specifically excluded schools. Faced with an unpleasant choice between wheeling out the chief medical or scientific officer to say the Scots were wrong or performing a U-turn, Downing Street chose the latter. That, rather than any medical reason, is why millions of school children were forced to spend months with grubby bits of material stuck to their face. So they chose the latter to keep the bullshit going rather than making Sturgeon look like a twat, because remember, in early 2020 they themselves said that masks don't work.
In terms of wearing a mask, our advice is clear that wearing a mask if you don't have an infection really reduces the risk, almost none, not at all. So we do not advise that.
Yeah, they made kids wear them because politically it was the easiest thing to do. That's pretty bloody evil. She finishes up talking about how the jab increases union ties, but to be honest, I think she's talking shit there. The people who want Scotland to leave still do, and the people who didn't still bloody don't. What an idiot for even saying it. Now, next up we have the dissenters, which is you and me guys, you know, the people he really bloody hates. Here she writes, as far as Hancock was concerned, anyone who fundamentally disagreed with his approach was mad and dangerous and needed to be shut down.
Well, it's just, it's been such a tough year for so many people, and...
Yeah, he needed to shut them down because his bullshit was so easy to bloody debunk. It goes on, his account shows how quickly the suppression of genuine medical misinformation morphed into an aggressive government-driven campaign to smear and silence those who criticised the response. Yeah, because it wasn't medical misinformation they targeted, it was anything that pointed out the holes in their own bullshit. Plus, let's be real here, if they was targeting real medical misinformation, then most of what the BBC said should have been taken down.
Our job is to report the news, not fabricate it. That's the government's job.
Yeah, it goes on though. Aided by the Cabinet Office, the Department of Health harnessed the full power of the state to crush individuals and groups whose views were seen as a threat to the public's acceptance of official messages and policy. So, not that they was a threat to public health, but simply because they was a threat to people believing the insanity these idiots made up as they went along. I mean, remember, you were safe if you drunk in the pub before 10 p.m. or had a Scotch egg with your meal, but were not safe if you didn't. Oh yeah, that sort of shit was common, as you know, and literally the reason why they had to shut people down. Now, the work that they put in to actually suppress what people were saying and censor anyone who might go against the narrative literally started before any talk about the virus really got among the public. It states here, as early as January 2020, Hancock reveals that his special advisor was speaking to Twitter about tweaking their algorithms, so they was planning for lockdowns and their narrative 2 months in advance at least. Later, he personally texted his old coalition colleague Nick Clegg, now a big cheese at Facebook, to enlist his help. The former Lib Dem Deputy Prime Minister was always happy to oblige. Yeah, of course he was happy to do it, and this now has me asking when Elon Musk is going to release the files on our government. As you likely know, he's currently doing Twitter files about the US, so hopefully he drops some about the UK government shenanigans. Now, after that, she goes on to talk about the censorship we all know about and the Great Barrington Declaration that Hancock himself did all he could to stop. Yep, she states here that Boris Johnson occasionally said that they might have a point, but to be fair, I don't even really care about that. The next bit here is interesting, so let's take a look at this instead. Here she writes, Hancock was horrified to discover that one of the architects of the Declaration, the Oxford epidemiologist Professor Sunipra Gupta, and her fellow signatory Professor Carl Hennigan, director of Oxford's Centre for Evidence-Based Medicine, had been into Downing Street to see the Prime Minister. Anders Tegnell, who ran Sweden's light touch approach to the pandemic, attended the same meeting. Hancock did not want them anywhere near Johnson, labelling their views absurd. So this is someone with no medical expertise telling professors of evidence-based medicine and epidemiology that their professional opinions are absurd. Take that shit in for a moment and wonder how the hell we ever got away with it, because it's bloody incredible. Next, it talks about lockdown protests and them banning them, which is obviously relating to many of us. It says here anti-lockdown protests were quickly banned when in September 20 the Cabinet Office tried to exempt demonstrations from the rule of 6. Hancock enlisted Michael Gove to kill it off, arguing that marches would undermine public confidence in social distancing. Gove had no qualms with helping out, it says. So they killed off the right to protest because it would undermine public confidence in the shit they told them, not because it was a medical risk. That there should once again see these scumbags arrested if you ask me. I'd like to know what you think on that one. Now, next up, it talks about care homes where Matt tries to blame everyone but himself, and Isabel Oakeshott fails to mention any of the drugs Hancock bought en masse or anything really in this bit. It is the shortest segment that really arouses the suspicion on how much of this has actually been hidden from the public and continues to be. Now, yes, she does talk about the isolation in care homes that see shit like this happen, but it's still only half the story.
I am asking you, I want this doctor. Hang on a minute, don't take her away. Hey, don't take her away. Don't take her away. Don't take her away. You.
Yeah, that is some criminally evil shit, but it doesn't stop there because of course we've got yet more stuff to go through. Next up we get to masks, or face nappies as I like to call them. Now, the first few paragraphs talk about early on in 2020 where ministers were told by various expert bodies that face masks were pointless. This we and that actually said on TV at the time, as many of you know. This, it's claimed, was down to Dominic Cummings pushing it like his life depended on it, with her quoting Hancock as saying Cummings was obsessed. It states that Chris Whitty told Hancock that he should make them compulsory, and Hancock, being Hancock, obviously jumped at the chance. Apparently he said he could see no reason not to use the powers of the state to enforce it, and the importance of masks should be in all our messaging. The Treasury was instructed to change a planned advertising campaign to ensure all models featured were masked up. So this is what started the mask mandating crap I ignored literally the whole way through. Bollocks to the powers of the state on that one. I ain't wearing face nappies full fucking stop. But it does show there, despite them knowing it was practically worthless, they did it anyway to further the narrative. I mean, it literally states here, Hancock, Whitty and Johnson knew full well that non-medical face masks do very little to prevent transmission of the virus. People were made to wear them anyway because Dominic Cummings was fixated with them, because Nicola Sturgeon liked them, and above all because they were symbolic of the public health emergency. Yep, symbolic is the main reason there. They increase people's feelings of fear, and that was their bloody goal. Now, the end of this article talks about cancer and how the government ignored any concerns about cancer treatment to make the NHS solely focus on bat flu. This we know about, and I've covered 100 times before, so I'll save us all the time of going over it again. Essentially, the National Health Service became the COVID Health Service, as you all know. None of this is bloody new information. Also, her conclusion I couldn't care less about, because to be honest, she seems like she's running damage control for Hancock, and that conclusion only makes me think it even more. It is up on the screen if you want to pause and read it, but for now I'm off to edit this bloody video, you know, so you can actually watch it.